review the minutes, so I'm not sure what was going on.
Just another item, and I republished everything. It seems to be working now. Are you able to give it a try here in the next minute or two? See if you get this.
Probably not.
Okay.
And it is 4:10. So given that I see we have enough people for a quorum, I want to call this meeting to order. Adam, who will be reading the rules of engagement and going through roll call today?
Yeah, I'll take this opportunity to introduce Jared Allen, who's with me tonight. He's our newest employee, admin technician with Lawrence Transit. So ultimately will be our front desk person when Central Station opens, the new facility, helping with customer service over there. But we've got plenty of customer service needs today and some other admin duties and customer interactions. So Jared's who we have with us, and he'll be helping read some of the early material and get us going tonight.
Okay. Thanks, Jared. Could you go through the rules of engagement for this meeting and then a roll call of committee members, please?
Yes. Good evening. My name is Jared Allen, Administrative Technician, Lawrence Transit. With me here is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. He will work alongside Mike Wazakowski to facilitate the meeting proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, when you are not participating, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found on the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu. In some cases, we may mute or unmute people as needed to minimize distractions during the meeting. Please remember to state your name and title for the benefit of those listening remotely. If you are participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. And now I will do roll call. Lance Fay.
Here.
Austin Stifler.
Present.
Mike Wazakowski.
Here.
Foster Spicinger.
I do not see them on the line.
Alan Ackland.
Here.
Gregory Critchlow.
I do not see Greg on the line.
Bill Wilson.
Present.
August Rudisell.
Here.
Freddie Gipp.
I do not see Freddie on the line. But that said, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members of PTAC here, so we have a quorum and this is an official meeting. So thank you to everyone for your attendance today. Now that we have called the meeting to order, the first item on our agenda is public comment. First, I'd like to check the room. Is there anyone in? I do not see anyone in the hall. Okay, so we will go to calls from people online. And I see JT Thornburg raising his hand. So JT, you have the floor for a few minutes.
I'd like you to know how wonderful it is to see numbers on the back of the new buses. When I began riding the bus years ago, I was surprised to find I needed to learn to ride the bus. And one of the detriments was no numbers on the back of the bus, especially when I was making connections. Occasionally I would miss a bus or get very confused, and it's really neat to see those numbers. I want to thank you.
Thanks for that comment, JT. And I chip in on that as well. In fact, I took a ride using the buses last weekend to go downtown and try out the electric ones. And it really helped for me to know that the electric buses are numbered 600 through, I think, 604 right now. So I knew exactly what routes to try out. So thank you for that information. Is there anyone else who would like to provide public comment on the line at this time? Okay. Hearing nobody, we will proceed then to the next agenda item, which is approval of the minutes from our November meeting. Yeah. So hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to review those minutes. And as always, I will offer everyone 3 opportunities to chime in and provide updates about different items. The one thing that I will note off the top of my head is I see under item E, Lance Fahey's last name is spelled incorrectly, so we'll need to update that.
Oh, did they put an E in it again?
So given that was the only update I had, I will then offer 3 times. First, does anyone in PTAC have any amendments to offer to the minutes from the November meeting? Second call, does any PTAC member have amendments to offer to the minutes from the November meeting? Last call, does anyone have amendments to offer to the minutes for the November meeting? Okay. Hearing none, the minutes are deemed approved by unanimous consent. First regular item on the agenda is electric bus performance data, which CTE has some slides that they're here presenting. I see a couple people, Maggie and Stephen on the line from CTE. So you two have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Steve Claremont, Director of Planning and Deployment for CTE, the Center for Transportation and the Environment. And I'm joined today by Maggie Madre, who is the project manager for the Lawrence Transit battery electric bus project. We've prepared, and when I say we prepared, I really mean Maggie prepared a series of slides for you today to go through some of the performance that we've seen to date. Maggie, next slide. But before we get into that, in case you're not familiar with CT, the Center for Transportation and the Environment, let me just take a few minutes to introduce ourselves. We are a nonprofit engineering and planning firm, which is kind of an odd combination. But we've been operating for about 30 years, and being a nonprofit allows us to take federal dollars or be directly funded by organizations like the FTA or the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, kind of any of the three-letter acronyms operating out of DC these days. We do specifically operate in the zero-emission technology space, providing project management and technical assistance services to not only transit agencies, but any public or commercial fleet operating a series of medium to heavy duty buses. You can see kind of some of our projects highlighted across the country where we've helped transit agencies get federal funding and then help them with deploying projects, deploying battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell buses. Next slide. We'll turn it over to Maggie.
All right, thanks, Steve. Hey, everyone. Like Steve mentioned, I'm Maggie Madry. I'm the project manager for Lawrence on a couple of different electrification projects. So just wanted to first start out by just providing a quick overview of the different electrification phases currently underway and in the near future. So CTE is supporting Lawrence in each of these three phases presented here. Lawrence has been able to pursue these different phases because of FTA's low or no emission grants, which Lawrence has received 3 of to date. So the first phase listed here, through that phase, Lawrence received 5 GILIG electric buses and charging infrastructure from ChargePoint. And so those buses were deployed at the end of August, a little bit earlier this year. And CT is currently now collecting performance data on those buses and generating a series of KPI or key performance indicators in order to help validate the performance of those buses. And so we're going to show a few of those KPIs later on in this presentation. But that's a little bit overview of phase 1. Phase 2 electrification is in the beginning phases. Right now, Lawrence is working on getting under contract with GILIG and ChargePoint once again. And so this time they'll be procuring 2 more GILIG buses, electric buses. These will have a larger battery capacity than the current 5 that they have right now. But those buses are expected to be delivered sometime in 2023. And then phase 3, Lawrence will be procuring 4 more electric vehicles. 2 of those are going to be full-size transit buses. This time they'll be manufactured by Proterra. And then the other 2 electric vehicles through this phase are going to be electric cutaways, which will be manufactured by Optimal. And so those buses and charging infrastructure, that's expected to be deployed in 2024. So that's a brief overview of the different phases that Lawrence has going on right now, and each of these phases CTE is involved in. So like I said, we're going to go through a couple of the KPIs that we have been presenting on for now 2 months. And so here's a list of all the different KPIs that we're currently tracking and reporting on specifically for Lawrence. But we're going to focus on these bolded ones up top for today and dive a little bit deeper into those. So the first one we've got here is average daily state of charge use. You'll hear me refer to state of charge as SOC, but this KPI is basically showing the daily percent state of charge that is used on the electric buses while they're in service. So you'll see that the first month of September, when the buses were in service, on average, about each bus used 52% of the available battery capacity each day, leaving about that yellow range in the middle, about 33% of state of charge unused. And then the 15% amount that you see in red at the bottom, that's what we're calling the head home zone. And this is a zone that Lawrence has identified specifically for their operations. So Lawrence is going to work towards utilizing the electric buses more and more each day, with the end goal of having the buses return to the depot with about 15% state of charge left on the buses. And so Lawrence, they're currently right now, you can see being a little bit conservative with the percent state of charge that they use each day, as everyone's getting used to operating these buses. It's a little different than what they're used to, but throughout the deployment, they're planning to push closer to that head home zone of about 15% remaining on the dash when they get these buses back to the depot at the end of the day. So you can see, already from September to October, right, they've increased that daily average SOC used. Any questions?
Yeah, I'll open it up because I do have one, but I want to see if anyone else has questions first. Does anybody in PTAC or other attendees have questions?
I'll just root us out, PTAC. And I don't know if this is the time. You can tell me if I need to wait, Maggie. I'm curious about what the ADA ramps do as far as drainage on the battery when they deploy and retract.
Yeah, we can ask that now, and Steve will probably have more to add. But those kind of auxiliary things, they're not going to drain the battery significantly. I don't know. We don't have a specific KPI that's going to track that, but it's not a significant drain on the battery. Steve, I don't know if you have any more specifics you can add
My
there.
question is, how powerful is that motor? That's going to tell you what the drain would be off it. But
Right.
It's probably not anywhere close to the power of the motor that you use to actually drive the vehicle.
Certainly not. And there are really two major things that we track or look at for efficiency that are the primary draws, and that's going to be, as I said, the traction motor, as well as the heating element or the air conditioning. So when we do our modeling, we'll specifically look at those two elements. Everything else that's operating on the buses, there is a power draw, but it's not going to have a dramatic impact on efficiency or range.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Does anyone else have questions in PTAC or members of the audience?
Lance Fay, Vice Chair PTAC. Do you happen to have or be able to direct me to a picture of the proposed cutaways, electric cutaways that we'll be using, and any details about those that might be different or advantageous to the type of cutaways that we're using now, as far as their structure and their entries and exits and things like that?
I certainly can provide that. I'm trying to think if on our website, if I can probably quickly find if we.
I Googled it, and I have no idea if they're anywhere close, but when she had that up on the screen, I Googled it, and they look pretty much similar to what we already have in the fleet. I could be wrong. I'm just saying I already Googled it, and they look very similar.
I think the first thing that came to my mind is ramp or ADA access on the cutaways. Just curious what that would look like and if it'd be different.
So we don't have any info on our website right now. It's Optimal S1LF is the name of that vehicle. It's a purpose-built electric cutaway with its low floor and has a ramp. So that's certainly something we can email out, or you can Google that, but I can for now just throw it in the chat for those able to access that.
Thank you for that. Does anybody else PTAC wise have comments, questions, or concerns at this time? Okay, the one question I had was my experience with electric driving has been that the two biggest factors that impact the efficiency of the vehicle are the speed that you're driving at, as well as the weather, like in particular, the ambient temperature. So would you be able to add that kind of information on an average basis to these graphics in the future to help us interpret the information better?
Yeah, I mean, we do have, I'm not sure it's on one of our slides here, but we do track weather because you're exactly right. Generally what we see when we compare efficiency with temperature, it's kind of inverse sine wave with each one of them. So
does really well between like 40 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and then starts to cramp the bucket after that.
Spring and fall are great. Winter's horrible, and then summer can be okay. But you're exactly right. And then as far as speed, what we do is we can track efficiency for each route, and then each route already has kind of its designated standard average speed, so we can make that correlation there.
Okay. That'd be great. Thank you. That's all I have at this time.
Okay.
Just a side note on this particular slide again, what we'd like to see over time is that you're able to use more of that SOC, because if you're getting both a financial benefit as well as a environmental benefit from using the electric buses, obviously that's what you want to do, use these as much as possible. But this is fairly common for initial deployments. This is kind of the range we see most people operating in when they're first deploying buses. And then these numbers start slowly improving as everyone starts feeling more comfortable with the operation of them.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Okay, we'll move on to the next one that we'll show. So distance driven through transportation disadvantaged zones. I'm going to pause here, let Adam give a brief summary of these zones.
Yeah, I just wanted to orient PTAC to what transportation disadvantaged zones are. So this is a locally developed equity tool from our MPO. So you may have heard of environmental justice zones, which primarily looks at low income areas of town, as well as areas of higher propensity of minorities. This includes both of those demographics, as well as households that have individuals who have disabilities, people with less than a high school education, single parent households, households without vehicles, and both people very young, less than 18 or over 65. So it essentially looks at kind of all these different factors that can lead people to be more likely to have challenges with transportation, and maps that across our city. So it's a little more refined look at where people in Lawrence might have a more difficult time getting around. And it's areas that we want to have intentionality in serving with transit. So one of the things we asked CTE to do was to, and Maggie will walk through this, but kind of evaluate how much we're using our electric vehicles in and around those transportation disadvantage zones compared to the rest of the city, so that we know we're treating people in these areas fairly compared to areas that may be less transportation disadvantaged.
Adam, can you explain why West Campus is so heavily included in what I believe is the non-disadvantage, or wait, but I guess what the difference in the colors?
So TD zones are done on a scoring basis. So they can score anywhere from 0 all the way up to 12. And I believe here we've highlighted those areas that are 6 or above, I think is where our cutoff was. So the lighter red areas are going to be scoring between 6 and 9 points on the scoring model. And the darker red are going to be 9 to 12 points. So, things can always get a little bit tricky when you're breaking it down by census block groups. In the case of campus, that one always tends to show up a little funny because of the way the census blocks are drawn. But that one's definitely driven by that youth factor that tends to show up in that area. And some of that single parent households can be just a little skewed in this sort of area. So that's maybe a block group you wouldn't necessarily expect to show up as much as some others, but it tends to when we do this type of data analysis.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what's going to happen when we put the central station right smack dab in that block there.
Yeah, certainly serving it directly. Yeah.
Lance Fay, Vice Chair, PTAC. Something else to keep in mind as these are being determined is that there are some fairly large apartment complexes in some of these areas that do, in fact, have ADA accessible and work with people with disabilities. So you might be surprised to find how many people that would fit into the demographic that are out in those areas. Having ridden the buses. So it makes sense to me from that perspective.
Okay. Adam, you want me to go now?
Yeah. Go ahead and jump in.
All right. So what we've done for this KPI is we've calculated what percentage each route goes through these TD zones that are specified here. So, like Adam mentioned, the TD zones are going to be the dark red and the light red areas on here. And this line coming through is, I believe this is Route 10. So the electric buses in October ran on Route 10 and Route 1. And so what we've done for each of these is what I stated is calculate, what percentage of that route is going through or alongside these zones. And so that's Route 10, and then Route 1 is shown here. And so, we take the total number of electric miles driven on each of these specific routes for each month, and we determine the number of those miles that then went through the zones. And so on this next slide here, I'll have more of some summary numbers. So we compare that number of miles that the buses went through the TD zones. And we compare that to the total revenue service miles driven by the electric buses in each month in order to get a percentage of revenue service BEB miles, battery electric bus miles that were driven in the TD zones. And so you can see, we've done it for September and October so far. So about 61%. And in September, the buses drove, Adam, you're going to have to help me. I believe they drove on 1, 7, and 10.
Primarily on 1.
Okay. So right now Lawrence is kind of trying the buses out on different routes. So this is going to change a month to month. But what we can see, September, about 61% of the revenue service electric miles were driven in those zones. And then October, about 51%. And what we've done is associate that with metric tons of greenhouse gases that were avoided in these transportation disadvantaged zones by driving electric buses and them instead of diesel buses. So we'll continue to track this month to month. But yeah, this has been a KPI that's pretty important to Lawrence as they want to track this in both TD zones and some in EJ zones as well. But yeah, Adam, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to this one.
I guess the only caveat I would add is we are still very much in the exploration phase, trying out buses on many different routes. We do ultimately want to make sure once we have good data across the system that we're putting buses in places that make equal or better impact for folks that are in disadvantaged areas. So that's our goal in tracking this, just to keep us honest on how we're deploying our resources.
Any questions from anybody on this one?
Yeah. PTAC members, does anyone have a comment, question, or concern about this slide info? The only thing I'll jump in on is good use of that A-Fleet tool. That's one of the few that I'd seen that actually applies to heavy duty vehicles, where everything else I've seen has always been passenger cars, which is not an equivalent use case. So thank you.
All right. Next one we've got here is fuel cost per mile. So, here we're showing the fuel cost per mile for Lawrence's different fleet types. So you've got the diesel fleet in the blue, gasoline in gray, and electric in green. So you can see that the electric cost is below that of diesel and gasoline, which we expect to continue seeing that throughout the deployment. Often one of the benefits of going electric is this decreased fuel cost per mile. You're not going to see it everywhere across the US, depending on the different electricity costs and rate structures, but it seems that Lawrence has a pretty beneficial electric rate for running these electric buses. So hopefully continue to see month to month this lower fuel cost per mile as compared to the other fleets. Any questions?
Before we continue, Adam, does this account for the deal that the city has to purchase electricity through Evergy at the preferential wind rate or something? I can't remember what the exact specific is on that.
So our electric costs here are, Evergy has a specific to transit electric vehicle rate that we get from a separate meter that's out at the facility that leads to all of our charging infrastructure. So that's where this rate ends up. There's not an overlay on that we specifically ask for that electricity to be wind or solar. I'm not sure that Evergy would offer us the same transit electric rate with any additional overlay like that on top of it.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Any other questions on this one before we move to the next? All right. So next we've got maintenance cost per mile. So again, you've got the diesel compared to the gasoline compared to the electric. And although a lot of electric deployments are still in kind of early stages of deployment, and the maintenance details are still becoming apparent, we do expect to see lower maintenance costs for the electric fleet as compared to the diesel and the gasoline. So we might not see it as low as what October is showing. That's really low, which is great, but might not expect it to be that low throughout the course of the deployment. But things such as propulsion related maintenance for electric, so electric propulsion systems, they're more efficient and they have fewer moving parts compared to that of internal combustion engines, and so that helps with decreased maintenance costs. In addition, like the lack of an internal combustion engine, right, means that there isn't going to be a need for oil changes. And the use of regenerative braking on electric buses is typically going to lengthen the life of brake pads, which again is going to help with maintenance costs. So those are just a few ways that electric maintenance costs can be lower. So So yeah, we expect lower maintenance costs throughout the rest of the deployment. But again, October is pretty low, and it might not be that low throughout the rest. But yeah, any questions on maintenance cost?
I'll just PTAC. Are the charger stations between the Gillig, the Proterra, and the Optima, are they compatible with each other, or are they brand specific, I guess?
I could chip in. I know they're all CCS plugs. They're the same plug, and it's basically designed to be the equivalent of use the same fuel pump to put in your gas as long as it's unleaded or diesel. It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, they all adhere to an SAE J1772 standard, so they are all compatible. We did have some issues in the past where even though the bus met the standard or the charger met the standard, they still didn't work together because there's some software programming that may need to take place in the background. But we do know that the charge point chargers that you have, we've seen them previously work with both Gillig and Proterra buses at other locations. I've not seen it with the Optimal yet, but I don't anticipate any issues. And if there are, again, they can fix it within a day or two to reset the programming.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mike.
Any more questions here? All right. Next one, we've got emission savings. So we always like to track emission savings that agencies are going to experience with the deployment of electric buses. So here you'll see that from September through October, Lawrence's electric buses have traveled just over 17,000 miles, which saved over 3,000 diesel gallons from being used, which prevented the release of 20 metric tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, which is like reducing around 50,000 miles of passenger car travel. So we'll continue to track this throughout the deployment, and all of these numbers will continue to rise as those electric buses get more and more miles on the road. So this is the last KPI that we're going to show today. And like I said, this is just for the first 2 months of the deployment of these buses. So we're going to get a lot more data over the coming months and continue to track these KPIs and report on them. So I'm sure we'll present some more results to you guys at some point. But any other questions?
Thanks, Stephen and Maggie. Anybody in PTAC or attendees meeting, do you have questions for Stephen and Maggie here? Hearing none. Only real question I have, Adam, is I know that we've started doing or deploying the electric vehicles along Route 6 for the last handful of weeks. Or what's the plan after that? What are we going to try and route them on next?
Yeah, so we have been running them on Route 6. We'll see some of that data show up in the next report that CTE helps us put together. We faced some challenges on some of our other routes with some turning movements for 40-foot buses. So we're working with First Transit's team to see the feasibility of deploying on other routes, or if we need to cycle back through some of those routes that we've already been on. I think we've talked about Route 7 as one that runs through a lot of the transportation disadvantage zones. There are a couple of tricky turning movements, though. So we have run them on that route before, not for full days, for partial days. So we just need to keep discussing what our comfort level is on a couple of these routes, and make sure we're putting them out where we're not putting bus operators in a tough spot. But yeah, it's our hope to keep spreading them around. One of the KPIs that we are tracking that didn't show up in tonight's presentation, but we'll start making all this more public as we get more months under our belt, is looking at ridership of people riding battery electric buses versus non-battery electric buses. And certainly Route 10 that crosses campus is catching a lot of ridership, and it travels through some transportation disadvantage zones. So, in addition to the equity reasons of trying to go through TD zones, we also would like many different rider groups across the city to have experience with what it's like being on an electric bus. So we're trying to think about that too, as far as getting more people the opportunity to ride one for their regular trips that they take. I would also add, so tonight we looked at 5 KPIs. I think I'd have to look back at our original list, but I think we're in the neighborhood of 15 total.
Yeah. Maggie, could you go back to that list?
Yeah.
And just wanted to note that after we get just a few more, maybe a couple more months under our belt and have some comfort with, how we're seeing the data move and are there any tweaks we need to make, we do plan to make monthly KPI reports available on the project website so people can see how this project is going, outside of a special PTAC meeting. So just know that that's coming down the road. We just are working with CTE to make sure we're all comfortable with our data sources and how they're getting displayed and how it's all coming together in the context of this report.
So I'll just finish up PTAC. How does the maintenance team had to be adjust or be uptrained for these type of buses? I assume it's been going on indefinitely since electric buses were even discussed, but now that we're going to be up to 12 buses, the math is
we'll have 11 at the 11? End of phase 3 right now.
And I'm sorry, August, did you ask about training? Is that what your question was?
Yeah, just how difficult has it been, or how much do you anticipate needed in the future?
Our first transit team has been really proactive in this space. So we of course worked with Gillig to try to get as much information ahead of the bus's arrivals, maintenance books and preventative maintenance books and things like that. Our team traveled up to Kansas City to talk with that whole maintenance shop because they had the same 40-foot Gillig electric buses that we got. So we learned some information there. There's been regional first transit teams come out and train our local team and help us, get some different equipment, composite boots instead of steel-toed boots for the shop, things like that, PPE that just comes along with electric buses. Gillig had specific courses when they came out that they taught, 4-hour, 8-hour, 24-hour, meaning 3 8-hour days, courses that they did with drivers and with maintenance staff. To become familiar and kind of know how all the pieces worked. And we'll expect the same type of thing to be happening with our next deployment of Gillig's, and then also the 2 additional vendors that we'll see a couple of years from now. We've all, in our application process, have asked a lot of questions about what training is going to look like and have programmed money for it. So we're kind of trying to soak in anything we can get, both from those empirical methods where we're talking with other maintenance shops that have done this before, as well as directly with the vendors and having their folks teach us.
I know you mentioned Kansas City. Have we talked with the airport crew? Because I know they're operating some electric buses on the Blue Economy lines as well to circulate people between terminals and the public parking or public economy parking areas.
We've not coordinated with MCI. They run BYDs, so they run a different vendor of bus on those routes. So there hasn't been as much of an overlap on kind of exactly what we might learn from them. Not that there's not something still to learn from people who've been working on these for a couple of years, but
it's different equipment, even if it's very similar technology.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just Al Ackland, PTAC member. Are you going to have a total cost KPI?
So help me understand, I guess. So we do fuel costs and we do maintenance. Are you thinking about other costs?
I'm talking about total cost, like the cost to buy a gas, diesel versus an electric, and then an overall if you operate them for 3 or 5 years, what's your total cost investment over that period?
Gotcha. I don't think we haven't asked CTE to do that. We certainly have done just in our Lono application project budgets, with the high federal share that we get through that for the upfront capital cost, our purchase cost is lower than a diesel bus. We've got some of those numbers just in internal spreadsheets, but not kind of in a public tracking like this.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the overall. If you throw out the tax money, just if you're going out as an individual or something, they have to buy them, out of your own pocket. What's your overall cost for operation without any federal tax money or offsets?
Yeah, and generally we'll do those type of total cost of ownership analysis with transition planning. And generally what we find is, even though you are having some savings with your fuel costs, being electricity, and hopefully with maintenance costs as well, generally it's not enough to offset the incremental capital cost of for the buses, incremental capital costs of buses, as well as for charging infrastructure. But you might get a little bit closer than most people because it is a lot more beneficial where you are than for other agencies.
Yeah, we definitely have low electricity costs in this region. Anecdotally, not on buses, but some people that I know who drive electric vehicles in, for example, Maine, have reported that they pay more on their fuel cost because the cost of gas there is relatively low compared to the rest of the country, and electricity is through the roof. So we're very fortunate to be in an area where our electricity makes it so that the ongoing cost of operating these buses is better than running a diesel or a hybrid one.
We did, Steve mentioned the transition plan. So worth noting that we did, as part of state grants last year, were awarded funds for a zero emission transition plan. We haven't had those funds released to us yet by KDOT, but that is a process we plan to go through, hopefully in calendar year 2023, help us figure out what our long-term strategy looks like. And that certainly is going to include total cost of ownership models and analysis. So, because it's a whole different animal once we get past 11 buses and we're talking about 25 or 50 or, inclusive of KU, close to 100 buses. That's a lot of infrastructure and a lot of upfront capital that we would need to line out and make sure we know what we're headed towards budgetarily.
Do any other PTAC members members of the audience have questions, comments, concerns?
Sorry, Alan, do you have something else? I
think he was saying thanks.
Oh,
I didn't mean to interrupt you, by the way.
Yeah, I'm a PTAC member. Yeah, I was just saying thanks.
Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Maggie and Stephen, for your time today and the useful information.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, and you have a great evening.
Okay. Next item on the agenda then is any PTAC member items, since we are done with our regular agenda. So put that out to those of you assembled. Do you have any items that you would like to discuss at this time, or that you'd like us to add to our agenda in January 2023 to discuss?
August Rudisil, PTAC. This may have already been discussed. What happens to the student fee that the KU students pay for this year and next year regarding the fare-free trial, I guess?
Margaretta DeFries,
yeah, I didn't.
Transportation Services.
Sorry, I didn't see you on the call.
It's okay. I had my video off while I was listening in on that part of the report. The student fees fund the university routes, and so students have been riding fare free since 2008. but basically the difference for them will be that they won't need to pull out their ID to board any buses off campus. And their fee will continue to fund the KU routes and a portion of the coordinated routes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, August and Margareta. Anybody else in PTAC have any items that they want to ask about now, or agenda work session items they'd like to add to January's meeting? Okay. Hearing nothing, just reminder as always, you can email myself and Adam and Lance, although that's going to change in the next few weeks, I think. But if you email us and you have something you'd like us to discuss in the future, we will definitely consider that and add it to our agendas as needed. So next item then will be transit staff items. Adam, looks like there are two things you wanted to mention to us.
Yeah, a couple things to touch on. So the first item is about Central Station and contractor award. So I had that listed here that we're planning to take that award on next week's City Commission agenda item. I will say we are working through some a couple of concerns related to the legal agreements with KU and KU Endowment. So I'm not 100% sure that date's going to hold. We're still trying to push towards that with our partners over at KU, but just want to mention that that's currently slated for December 20th for us to award that contract, and we're still trying to make that, but may need to adjust a little bit as we work towards those final legal agreements. The other bullet that you alluded to there, Mike, is I just wanted to put this on the agenda now to get a portion of the discomfort out of the way and get people thinking about if they are or are not willing to be chair or vice chair for next year. So we'll talk about that at our January meeting, but I wanted you all to start thinking about if you're willing to do that, or if you think somebody else on the team would be willing to do that. We'll try to get those voted on in January.
Thank you, Adam. I'll just chime in first thing with the Central Station thing. Is that anticipated to be a part of the consent agenda then?
It would be, yep. So the contractor award would be part of the bid items section, and then the legal agreements, if we can get those on there, would just be part of the general consent section.
Okay.
So both of them are consent, but just different sections of it.
Thank you. And then the other thing in terms of chair and vice chair elections, I'll take this opportunity. I know that we have a few people on the committee whose terms are, at least this current term is expiring. Bill Wilson, Austin Stifler, Lance Fay, all of you, I believe all of you are eligible to serve another term if you so desire, and the mayor would like to reappoint you. If you do want to serve again, I heartily encourage you to do so because I enjoyed working with you. But if not, I do appreciate your effort and your attention to improving Lawrence Transit and KU on Wheels service and our responsiveness to our riders' needs over the last year term. And I wish you the best in the future. In terms of chair elections, I think it's rather gauche for me to say that I'm going to nominate myself, but I would welcome someone nominating me for another term, as I've really enjoyed it. And I look forward to the opportunity to contribute to Lawrence Transit success going forward. In that, we are at the end of our agenda. So I'll give everybody one last opportunity before we break until the new year. Does anyone have anything that they would like to say before we adjourn? That looks like a lot of mute signs, so I will take that as nothing. With that, then, we will meet on January 9th, same time and place. We will probably have potentially some new members, potentially some returning members. Look forward to seeing you then. Lance, if you want to bang the gavel, you feel free to at this time.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Adam.
Have safe
Thank you.
holidays.